It took exactly 10 years after the death of my wife for me to realize that my family only loved a version of me that served them. When Clara passed away from an aggressive illness, the silence in our massive home became deafening. I expected grief to be a shared burden, but instead, it became a solitary confinement sentence while everyone else simply moved on with their lives. Clara and I shared nearly 3 decades of absolute devotion, building a life filled with laughter and simple routines. She was the anchor of my existence, the person who understood my silence and made the loudest days feel entirely peaceful. When she vanished from this world, the physical structure of our daily life remained, but the meaning behind every single room completely evaporated into thin air. My older sister Brenda and my younger sister Valerie stood by my side during the memorial service, offering empty promises of constant support. My daughter Paige and my son Logan wept openly, assuring me that they would never let me feel isolated. They all wore black and held my hand, but those sweet gestures vanished the moment the funeral flowers withered away. To cope with the agonizing emptiness, I began cooking massive traditional meals every single weekend, hoping to draw my children back into my warmth. The first few Sundays were filled with the loud chaos of grandchildren running through the halls and family members sharing stories. I stood in the kitchen believing that we would survive this tragedy together, completely blind to the reality of their creeping indifference. Slowly, the bustling Sunday gatherings began to dwindle as the months pressed forward into autumn. Brenda claimed she was far too busy with local community events, while Valerie simply stopped making the drive altogether. Paige always had a new excuse involving the chaotic schedules of her children, leaving me alone with massive amounts of untouched food that eventually found a permanent home inside my freezer. Logan lived a mere 12 minutes from my front door, yet his absence felt like the heaviest blow to my fracturing heart. He stopped answering my phone calls entirely, choosing instead to send brief text messages promising a future visit that never actually materialized. I kept a meticulous log on my device, tracking how my entire family contacted me a grand total of 11 times during that entire grueling first year. Desperation drove me to drive 45 minutes to the home of Paige one Saturday afternoon, just to see my grandchildren. I sat in my vehicle for 10 minutes, swallowed by a deep sense of humiliation before finally knocking on the door. Paige looked utterly startled to see me, claiming they were just heading out, even though I could clearly see her husband Derek relaxing in the living room. By the 5th year of total isolation, I attempted to communicate my profound loneliness directly to my siblings during a rare phone conversation. Brenda offered nothing but shallow sympathy, reminding me that 40 minutes was a long distance to travel regularly. Valerie told me to stop being highly sensitive, explaining that everyone had complex lives to live, which shattered the remaining hope I held for emotional rescue. The true turning point arrived when Logan suddenly contacted me during the 7th year, desperately begging for $26,000 to fix a failed business venture. I provided the funds immediately because he was my son, foolishly hoping this massive gesture would finally repair our fractured bond. He visited regularly while the debt remained, but the exact moment he finished paying me back, his sudden warmth instantly froze over again. On my 67th birthday, I sat completely alone at a dining table meticulously set for 6 people, eating pot roast in total silence. Not a single person arrived to celebrate with me, sending only brief text messages or short, distracted phone calls. It was at that exact moment, staring at the empty chairs, that I realized I was waiting for people who had already completely forgotten I existed. Without uttering a single word to my relatives, I quietly contacted a distant real estate agent and listed the family home for sale. It sold within 3 weeks for cash, allowing me to quietly shift my retirement funds into entirely different accounts that were incredibly difficult to monitor. I disconnected my phone number, permanently deleted every single social media account, and prepared to vanish into a brand new life. I relocated to a beautiful, quiet town named Mill Haven, situated 3 hours away on the edge of a massive, peaceful lake. I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment, unpacking only my books, the photographs of Clara, and her cherished family cast iron skillet. For the first time in a decade, I slept peacefully through the night, leaving behind the heavy ghost of a family that never truly cared. Months later, my family finally realized my old phone lines were dead and converged on my former property, only to find complete strangers living there. The sudden shock sparked mass panic among them as they desperately tried to calculate the last time anyone had bothered to check on me. Logan even tried to file an official missing persons report, but law enforcement naturally refused to investigate a grown man who chose to leave. Brenda eventually hired an investigator who located my new address in the spring, leading Paige to travel down and confront me directly. I returned from a peaceful morning walk by the lake to find my daughter weeping bitterly on the front steps of my apartment building. She demanded to know how I could abandon them, screaming that they had been absolutely terrified that something horrific had happened to me. I sat beside her calmly and asked if she could even remember the exact date of my birthday, watching her stumble over the wrong numbers. I calmly detailed the 10 years of empty chairs, the ignored invitations, and the painful reality of standing in her driveway feeling like an unwanted stranger. As she wept in silence, I finally understood that walking away was not an act of malice, but the ultimate act of self-preservation.